I have a young niece and nephew, and they are beginning to walk. They're beginning to understand how they can depend on their legs, but in that there's a lot of stumbling, a lot of falling, but a lot of just learning how to rely on the thing that helps them stand up. And I think the Christian walk is a lot like that. The Christian walk is learning to understand how do we rely on God so that we may learn how to walk. And in fact, Scripture has a saying for this. It's called walk in the Spirit or walk by the Spirit. And this is seen in Galatians 5:16. And what not walking in the Spirit is it's not finding our own strength to follow God. It's not relying on our own strength, on our own will, on our own power to be perfect or be good or be good enough. That is not the Christian walk. In fact, walking in the Spirit means to have total dependency, reliance, and continuity with God. To walk in the Spirit means that we are fully depending, relying, and continually walking in the Spirit. So the big question becomes, how do we do that? How do we, instead of fighting to be good or to walk by our own power, fight to depend on God, fight to depend on who God is? And our example is Jesus. Our example is Jesus because what he does is he gives the Father full access to every part of his life. And that's what to walk in the Spirit means, that we will give full access of dependency on every part of what we have in our lives, whether that's in our marriage, and that means two people working together as one to follow Christ, to have a Christ-centered marriage, in how we talk about things like how Christ gave himself sacrificially for the church. We as spouses are to give ourselves sacrificially to one another, or to love each other continually, to speak in patience, and to build one another up as Christ built up the church. To walk in the Spirit there is to give full access to God in your marriage. That could be in our lifestyle. For some of that might mean slowing down our pace of life, to taking these moments of rest and taking moments to pause and saying, my goal is not the end here. A goal is just accomplishing something else, but rather to give full access to God, to allow ourselves to slow down and to take in who he is, as well as just take in the goodness of life. But sometimes that also means speeding up, to move away from complacency, move away from laziness. It could be full access in our emotions and how we're feeling anxious or angry or grieving, allowing God to have full access there, that instead of having to stumble in our pain, we can go through the pain with him, and allowing God to have full access to our emotions. Scripture also talks about how having full access to our sin, that we recognize our sin, we confess it, we give it to God in forgiveness, and work then with the body, with one another, in places of reconciliation and forgiveness and restoration. It could be full access in a lot of things, like money, of how we use it, where we spend it, where we shouldn't spend it. It could be things like justice and recognizing the downtrodden and fighting for the marginalized and caring for those who may not look like you but are still made in God's image. It could be in places of how we love each other and we care for one another. And just like how we've been continually asking you to call people, giving God full access to use your time to build one another up, to care for one another, to reach out to other people. To walk in the Spirit means that we are giving full dependency, reliance, and continuity to God. It's something that we don't have a one and done kind of thing. It's something where every day we are learning to take one step at a time in giving God full access to who we are, so that we may walk by his power and not ours.